Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
Brandon, we have another return guest on the show this evening, Andy Riise, who the listeners will remember when we had Andy on the show, I guess about a year ago, and he is just starting out, going to be a mental skills coach for the Cincinnati Reds. And we were just starting out. So kind of we were all rookies, or as Andy would say, and you'll hear about this in the show, had that white belt mentality, going into it. But really great friend of the show. Even though we have not had Andy on the show for a while, we've swapped a bunch of text messages and things like that. He's somebody who keeps up with what's happening and is always there to, provide recommend a guest or something like that. But for the listeners, Andy is a graduate of West Point. He played football there, spent over 20 years in service with, the military, was involved in special forces, co-author and senior editor of Deliberate Discomfort, How U.S. Special Operations Forces Overcome Fear and Dare to Win by Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. And then, of course, as we just mentioned, he was a mental skills coach in Major League Baseball. And among other things, right now his title is like Texas A&M University Program Director for the National Security of Innovation Network. So pretty cool stuff.
Real cool stuff. Great background. I think what the listeners probably heard in the last episode, and then, and that, by the way, that's what I love about this forum, is that they could go back and listen to the first one and then go into this one. Andy's one of those guys that you just like talking to. And he's quick, he's witty. I think his skill set is he has found his purpose. So many people are looking for their why, and Andy Riise knows his why, and he
Absolutely.
Pours into it with everything he has. And we talk about servant leadership and things like that, and that's what Andy is. And you make a really good made a really good comment about, his service doesn't end. And I don't think Andy's a guy that ever lets his service end, not just for what he's done for the country through the government and military and all that, but what he does for the youth, for the community, he is constantly serving. It's just in his nature. And great guy. I can't believe you decided to come back on with us, right? You've mentioned a couple of returns.
Usually
guests.
It only takes one. He's a slow learner. That's the one thing we found about him.
Somehow or another, it made its way through his spam filter. And so he's back.
Of all of his traits, learning how to, read podcast hosts is not one of them.
That is correct. Correct. But we're happy to have him back, and what a great guy.
No, I'm with you. You bring up a good point there about I didn't think about this, but that service is, even when he's not in these positions that, he seeks out to serve, like he's the coach of his kids' sports teams and stuff,
right.
He's just literally, it's just in his blood to go out and serve and volunteer. And so I think that's a really cool thing. Hey, speaking of sports, Tyler Zombro, who a lot of you all may remember, Tampa Bay's organization, pitcher for the Tampa Bay's organization, and somebody that I know his family, know Tyler well, and we had him on as a guest right after, it was soon after, I should say, his horrific accident on the baseball field where he was hit by a batted ball, went to Duke University, really scary moment for a lot of people. And when we had Tyler on the show, we were asking him about like, hey, what's the future? And Brandon, he didn't blink. He was like getting back on the mound, and he got back on the mound. I mean,
my God, he did about 3 or 4 days ago, and super proud of him. And it definitely has made me think again about just seeing him, just the mental toughness that is required to get back up there. I think it's just amazing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And opening day, I'm going to get a chance to come down to Atlanta, spend opening day with you down there. We'll see the Reds, speaking of the Reds and the Braves. I won't recognize any of the Reds players because, of course, they emptied like they do every year. They emptied their roster. So you'll be learning the team as soon as as much as I am that day. So
that's funny. Well, you're right. And I'm looking forward to it. Outside of our own opening days, this will be the first opening day I think we've seen together. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great.
Absolutely. Well, man, listen, you guys, we will talk to you after next week, and get your pen and paper ready. Here's Andy Riise. Well, you listeners will be familiar with this next voice that you hear, I guess, after mine. But Andy Riise is back on the show with us. And if you remember, I guess it's been probably, I would say it's probably a little, about a year since we've had Andy on the show with us. The last time, actually, it probably has been, because last time we talked to Andy was right as he was starting his new gig with the Cincinnati Reds as the mental skills coach. So, Andy, welcome back, man. We are so glad to have you back on.
Hey, fellas, there's only two other people that I respect and laugh with more, and that's Huff and Doback from the Step Brothers movie. I'm so excited to be playing karate in the garage with you guys. Just don't touch my drum set.
That's right.
I'll touch it. Beds. Oh, I'm going to touch it.
Don't touch my drum set.
Well, man, what has been happening since the Cincinnati Reds? I know that I personally, and Brandon knows, that there's been some stops since then, but talk to the listeners, if you would, Andy, about what's been going on.
Absolutely nothing. Next question. No, man, how much time we got? So, yeah, I had an awesome gig with the Reds, as you guys know. It was phenomenal. I'm so thankful for them as an organization. I'm so thankful for my opportunity to work with them. And it was a dream come true in a lot of ways. And, I know even for you guys, when we're side hustling, we're doing this stuff. And, I felt like I was living the dream, not just for myself, for other people. And including you guys. I know what a big fan of Pete Rose are. And we were talking about that. I got a Pete Rose jersey, by the way. I should have wore it today. I think I sent it to you guys. But one of my trips to Cincinnati, I picked that up, and I had to rep Pete Rose for you. But it was just where I was on the road a lot, and that's just part of the grind. And I realized that, hey, 5 months had gone by, and I missed the summer with my kids, and I realized the grind was not sustainable, and it kind of defeated the reason why I had retired, which is to spend more time with my family and to be available to them, and so it just was an easy decision for me. And I decided to kind of just choose my family over, my personal selfish needs and wants. And despite as much as I loved being a mental skills coach for professional baseball, I love my family more. And I think we've all been there, and it's really hard to walk away with things. And I call that grit's glass ceiling, right? What are you willing to sacrifice in order to be able, and when do you need to walk away before, you're really doing everyone a disservice, including yourself. Mm-hmm. So I got this opportunity to come work in the defense innovation space. And, prior, as I was transitioning, I was, dabbling in a bunch of different things. And one of the things I caught word of when I was transitioning, I went to Stanford Ignite, which is an executive program in the Stanford Global School of Business, and features entrepreneurism and entrepreneurial principles. It's like a crash course MBA. And all these people that I were there with were involved in this defense innovation space. And I'll explain what that is. But one of them was a guy named Jim Raybuck. And at the time I knew I was moving to Texas, and we he had come back. He graduated a couple years ahead of us. And, at the time he was working with Amazon and building his own business, but then he joined this government organization called the National Security Innovation Network. And I'm building my team here in the Southwest region. We're embedded in all these universities across the country. And hire somebody at Riise. I know you're in baseball. You know if anybody be interested? I'm like, well, what's insane? Describe me what you're looking for. So he described it, and I was like, holy cow, that sounds amazing. And I said, I would be interested. And
Found
this
somebody.
guy, right? And so, yeah, exactly. Yeah. This guy pointing at myself. But he said, I said, hey, I signed with the Reds. Stay in touch. It's just a 1-year contract. It's an experiment on both ends. We'll see what happens. So we stayed in touch. He said, well, I'm building out the Texas A&M position. I was like, really? So I just got a year head start there. As your listeners know, if you go back, I was teaching at the Texas A&M Coaching Academy. I fell in love with Aggie Land. We were talking about that in a pre-show. Yeah. Anyways, it just lined up that, I walked right out of the Reds at the end of the minor league season, right into my job here at Texas A&M as the university program director for Texas A&M. And I can explain what that is and what that entails.
Yeah. And I definitely want you to do that, because I also think that it leads into some of the stuff that you're doing through the Presidential Leadership Scholar Program and some of that. So kind of open that up for us, and then we'll really dive into it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my job is now, and a lot of people don't understand this space, but I think you look historically, putting your mind what the Manhattan Project was about, right? Where we're bringing together, top tier 1 universities and researchers from academia. We're bringing together leaders in the defense industry. We've got a really hard problem we have to solve. I know about that. We're bringing in, entrepreneurs and ventures who otherwise wouldn't work with the government, to bring them together in this ecosystem to really try to solve really hard national security problems that are the better good for society, and especially with our capitalist approach to things here in the Western part of the world. So that's what I do. My job is to be the catalyst for that, to be the coordinator for that world. And specifically here in Texas, my main territory that I work is in the Texas Triangle, which is near and dear to me because I get to invest where I live in. And for my first time, kind of really invest in my community and my state. And so that territory spans from Dallas, Fort Worth, draw the line down to Austin and San Antonio, all the way over to Houston. And A&M is smack dab in the middle of that. They're tier 1 university, one of the largest land grant colleges in the country. They have a historical military tradition with the Corps of Cadets here as well too. They have their national and state service is really renowned. And so it's an easy sell because Texas A&M is already doing really great stuff with the DoD from a research perspective. Mm-hmm. And so my job is to, a couple things. If you look at a Venn diagram, like on the top Venn diagram where I spend most of my time is working with students and faculty, recruiting STEM talent to come in and work with the DoD. I actually have student teams and classes that are working on like senior capstone projects, trying to solve, for example, how to do digital gunnery for, machine guns that are mounted on Humvees, for example. So look at them as student teams, like being outsourced to help solve, real world military units who are going to war and try to solve their problems for them, which is something I experienced all throughout my military career. A lot of people don't think the military is innovative, but, we're really good at solving the problems of the day by need, but not really about projecting out in the future. Mm-hmm. And so the student team is diagram 1, and faculty, and then the number 2 is research and development. Doing some really cool stuff with there, like companies like Wave Neuro on brain health and science. So we've got, you think about doing pre and post commercial fMRIs on athletes or Corps cadets or soldiers. And then we're doing brainwave treatment that's magnetic electronic resonance training that help not only treat pathology like anxiety and depression, but they also help with, decision making and, composure and concentration and sleep. That's a really cool company that I'm working with. And, Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M football, they've been using it. The Corps Cadets is getting their brain scanned, and we're doing a really cool study with our medical school and the Air Force Special Operations Command. So that's kind of bucket number 2. And number 3 is working with the venture community as well too. So that's where my passion kind of really comes into the intersection of things where I'm doing more work, where I work with a lot of like industry, sports, and the military on health and human performance ventures to kind of bring programs, services, products into the Department of Defense to help solve relevant problems that aren't just exclusive to the military, but also, things that sports and the corporate or health sector are struggling with as well too. And so I just got done the South by Southwest, bringing a whole bunch of cool people together. And so my government agency is leaning on me to help shepherd that because of my background. So I'm super passionate about that. So when you add all those three diagrams together, it's really comes down to the things that I've always been about. One is service. One is, helping solve problems. And three is helping people and teams get better at what they do. So it really is a good alignment for me. And oh, by the way, I get to be a scout dad, and I get to coach rugby, and I get to, set my own hours and be available to my family. So it's really the best of my worlds coming together in one job.
That's amazing. So Andy, how do you take the mental coaching side of things that the listeners probably remember? Where in the Venn diagram does the practitioner of those mental coaching pieces come into play, or does it?
It does. I mean, every day, like it's, and I'm sure you guys appreciate this too. I mean, it's inherently baked into everything you do. Mm-hmm. And that stuff is really important. Like if you're a young practitioner out there, or you're someone who's a student of this stuff, is that the beauty about mental skills is it isn't a separate activity. It's woven into everything that you do. And if you're doing it right, it eventually becomes part of who you are. It's going to come out. Right. And regardless of what your primary job is and the hat you wear, you're getting sets and reps in everything you do if you're doing it right. And that's no different from me. So like, for example, like I'm working with students who are engineers. And, when I first came in, they called, the mental and emotional aspects of self-awareness and self-regulation, like soft skills, and they weren't put on a premium. And also like interpersonal aspects of what they're doing. They're working together as a team. They're getting out of their comfort zone and just working with people in the military they've never worked with before. I mean, even things as simple as an 18-year-old picking up the phone and calling someone and having a conversation is uncomfortable. Team building, those type of things, which is really, really cool. I've had students that follow up with me with some one-on-one stuff. So I really, really enjoy that. So that the teacher side of me really gets itched there. And then, when you think about it, I'm really coaching businesses on how to mentally approach innovation from not just their standpoint, but from a national security and homeland security standpoint too, and about how to make decisions that involve risk, that involve patience and persistence, how to, when inevitably you're going to encounter failure throughout the course of your business, people who may come out of a university setting with a PhD who've got this amazing tech that they develop, but they have no idea how to be able to grow a business. And not that I do, but I understand enough about the psychology of entrepreneurship to where I can help them with that aspect of what they do, in addition to all of the other resources that we have, like financially, or programs or connecting them to the right DoD partners that are part of the hard skills or hard offerings of my job. I'm able to offer those intangible aspects of leadership and mental skills training that they otherwise wouldn't get. And again, it's all part of the same package.
Well, and it's interesting, Andy, because I was thinking about a few different things there, and the listeners will remember from the last show, that your book that you had kind of co-authored and edited, The Deliberate Discomfort. I mean, when you start thinking about problems, you start thinking about giving people, challenges like, solving some of these problems y'all are going to be talking about. It's uncomfortable, right? I mean, that's definitely uncomfortable. And then I started thinking about where you were talking about how, from a military perspective, you're used to solving the problem by need, the one that's in front of you. But where I really see it being beneficial, specifically the sport that you came from prior to getting into this, is baseball. Baseball is all about being in that first and second inning and thinking ahead to the sixth and seventh inning. It's preparing the bullpen. It's getting your arms. It's thinking about, okay, what happens? Who's our oh shit guy for today, for example, if our starter only makes it through 3 innings. So I think it's actually probably beneficial for you that you actually got some of that depth of knowledge and experience around that particular game of all games, just because of the fact that, it's a lot of problem solving in baseball, but there's a lot of that strategy looking ahead as well.
Yeah, you're so right. I posted about this today. I think the greatest gift that baseball gave me in my short period of time, and I'm not done yet, guys, believe me.
Right.
That's a whole other conversation as far as where the future of mental skills is in baseball. I'm not done by a long shot, in terms of my work at pro sports, but strategic patience, I think, is the biggest thing that I gained from that. And my buddy Ben Freakley, who I highly recommend you guys have on as a guest, he's one of my Obi-Wan Kenobis of the Mental Skills Jedi Knight Council, and I'm going to be seeing him. He left the Blue Jays. He's now with University Health and Human Performance. It's a program called FitOps that helps veterans become certified strength coaches, but it's really a holistic approach. The word holistic is totally overused, but basically mind, body, spirit, character, craft, all kind of wrapped into one type of practitioner. Veterans and service members, they have an awesome, I would say, compound. It's really like a camp to where you're immersive up there in Bentonville, Arkansas. But one of the things that he taught me was, getting into baseball, and he'd been 5+ years. He had been like a soccer coach at VMI, and he's my age, and he's got a lot of experience. I said, Ben, what do you recommend? Like, his dad was a general. His brothers are all Army Rangers. I'm like, Ben, based on what you know about military guys, like, what do you think of the big mistakes that guys like me would make? Spend a career in the military going into baseball, and what can I do to be successful? And his words were really powerful to me, because it was like, Andy, the one thing about you military guys, which is a great thing, is that, you're always on the offensive, and you're aggressive, and you're trying to make good things happen for the right reasons, but in baseball, you got to let the game come to you. If you force things, that becomes problematic, because the game is built to play out over the long run. And that's especially true when it comes to relationships with people and being a mental skills practitioner, because it's very, the turnover is really high, even in our field. And so if you really want to be effective, it just show up, what I call, my words are being with my white belt mindset. And I've got a lot of black belt knowledge, skills, and experience, and a lot of tools that I can bring to bear, but that's not what they need right now. What they need is to understand who Andy is, the man, not Lieutenant Colonel Reese, but who is Andy. And by just, being open and curious and available, being consistent, shagging balls, doing fungos. And I talked about that, I think, last time, but by doing that, really, really well, and setting that foundation of trust and rapport during spring training, everything just opened up from there. And so by the time, people were coming to me, and they just started to build momentum slowly. And and it's not a regret. I think the only thing that I walked away from was that I just started to build a really great program, and by laying a good foundation and started to build those relationships. And the part that hurts my heart is that I started to build these relationships, and then I went away. And so now they got to start over again with somebody new. And for me, that hurts the field, that hurts the players, and so forth. It's just the unfortunate aspect of doing business. But what I've done is I kind of applied that same white belt mindset and being strategically patient to my field now, because I don't know. There's a lot I don't know about defense innovation. Yeah, I was in the military for 20 years, but that doesn't mean anything. Right. This is a whole nother ball game. Like, I'm not a business guy. I'm not a research guy. I know a little bit about higher education, but the military academies aren't the same as being in a tier 1 public university, one of the largest land grant colleges in Texas. I'm an outsider. So I had that same approach, one day being a Cincinnati Red, to day being a Aggie and representative of the DOD here in Aggie land. And so I think it's really served me well. And believe me, I haven't it all figured out. I've made plenty of mistakes already, but by playing the long game is something that's been really important that I would like to relay and encourage the listeners to try to pursue and figure out how to do that.
Well, you're spot on with that white belt mentality. Just because you have black belt skills doesn't mean that there's not tremendous power in that white belt mentality. I do this all the time in my arena as far as a leader goes, is, just because I've already done their job and moved on to other positions of increased responsibility, I think those that can kind of relate back and let them know, I think the more that you can disarm situations by letting them know, hey, I've been here, I've walked the walk, I've done some of the things that you're challenged with right now, and let them know it wasn't always perfect. And just like you're just talking about there, if you keep that white belt mentality, when you're a white belt, learning isn't always linear. There's those loops that you have to go through. And sometimes you're going to have days where it goes out and looks good and it looks like you're closer to, moving on to the next belt. But then there's other days you're reminded you're just a white belt, and you still have lots of things to learn. So I think it's really important to keep that in all aspects of it. And I think the fact that you're kind of tying in some of the things you reminded me of something. I sent you a text recently about an article of yours that I had read, servant leadership, because that's what I think we're talking about when you start thinking about being that white belt mentality. And you had an article, and just for the listeners, and I want to pause here and let you all know about a website. And if you've not visited this website, it's called Medium, and it's www.medium.com. But it sounds like, Andy, it seems like it was a lot of like thought leaders and people that are just kind of, it's a forum, if you will, for people to submit articles and different things like that. And Andy has about 4 or 5 articles that I saw that were posted on this. But you had an article on there that I was laughing out loud at, by the way, but I copied it and sent it to my team of leaders because it was about servant leadership and how you're never too important to take out the trash. Can you share that story with us? I loved it.
No, thanks. Well, thanks for you and my mom, my wife, were the third person to read that article. So thanks. Thanks, brother. Appreciate that too. So even Midwad Bickering hasn't read it yet. That's right. No, but so the story is the title of the article is Toyota, and that's really and I'll circle back around to what that means. So when I was a brand new second lieutenant, I was a field artillery officer stationed in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And there just was a lot that you're figuring out. And a second lieutenant is really the novice in the white belt of the officer corps. So even though you go to West Point, there's just a lot that you're learning from everybody. And I think one of the best parts that I encountered was that I didn't really expect was my peer leaders. And one of them, and they're called Mustangs is the nickname for them. But there's 3 ways you get commissioned in the U.S. military, in the Army specifically. Obviously, you go to West Point, they're a very small population. The largest population is ROTC, like, for example, here at Texas A&M. And the third one's the Officer Candidate School. And Officer Candidate School is kind of this interesting mixed bag. It's a 19-week program, and it's designed. It's another way for people who start off enlisted, who are soldiers right off the street who come into the military to go back and then become an officer. And so one of them was a good friend of mine. His name is Brian Davis, and he was a non-commissioned officer, meaning he was enlisted and then worked his way up his rank and become a leader, because otherwise, if you're not officers become leaders right away, but if you're enlisted, you don't become a leader right away. And so he had a lot of seasoning ahead of me. He was older than me. He was married. He had kids. And so he just was very wise. And he was, excuse me, he was the platoon leader of my platoon of 30 men before I got there. And it was really cool because I got this unique opportunity. When I showed up, I went out to White Sands, New Mexico to train. At the time, this is like 2002, mid 2002. We were actually getting ready to go to Iraq, and we just didn't really know it. So we were doing a live fire. It was like a month long field training exercise out in the desert out there, and I got a chance to spend that entire time shadowing him, which is really rare. You don't ever get a chance to do that, and that was my first opportunity. So I just got a chance to watch and hang out and be one of the guys, and it was like a master class in being a platoon leader, just how he did business. And our personalities are very different, but we became friends. And so, he became the executive officer. So he moved up as the number 2 person behind the commander when I was took over his platoon. And so we shared an office at the time. And, inside the company headquarters, it has a little bit of a white and blue collar feel, right? And, the military at large is very blue collar, but you have a higher headquarters as a white collar function with all the administrative stuff and so on and so forth. So like you think of kind of like, our administrative section called the training room, and you had soldiers that are there, and they're usually injured for some reason because they're not down on the line working in the motor pool that man are, well, in this case, there's multiple launch rocket system, which I won't get into that. You guys can Google it. But long story short, one of the soldiers that would come in every evening, we're working long hours. So we would be down in the motor pool or out in the field training. At the end of the day, we go back into our paperwork that officers have to do quite a bit all throughout their career. And so we would be in there late, and then the soldiers would come in and empty the trash. And this one soldier, and I called him Snuffy, just to protect his name and identity, Joe Snuffy, and he had this long southern drawl, and he was a big kid too, man. He'd always have a big dip in his mouth. So he kind of looked at me and he'd slump his shoulders over and he'd stand there at the door, the position of attention, straight as an arrow, with his big dip in his mouth, and be like, gentlemen, can I take your trash out? And, and I would say, yeah, take my trash out. Yeah, absolutely. And I would kind of look behind my computer, and Brian would always like wave him off. And so that happened for a while, and about, it's probably about a month into this that he kept on doing this. And I'd be like, one time, I was chatting Snuffy up, whatever, where you from, whatever. And, and so, and then he left, and I was like, Snuffy's a good guy. I said, hey, Brian, why don't you ever ask Snuffy to take your trash out? He's like, well, I just take the dumpster's on my way out to my car. Just take it out. I said, yeah, but he's taking it out anyways. Why don't I give it to him? He's like, Andy, honestly, man, he's like, when I was in his position so many times, and I do all these menial jobs, and I told myself whenever I became an officer that I would refuse to do that, as a leader, especially as a servant leader, my job is to take care of my men, and that you're never too good to take out your trash. And I said, man, that's pretty awesome. So I just started. So again, I followed suit and I started taking out my own trash. And later on, we would deploy about 6 months later to Iraq, and Snuffy he had a knee injury, and he would eventually come into my platoon, and he was a driver for my platoon sergeant, right? And so we were in this convoy going down Baghdad. We had just taken Baghdad, and we had transitioned. This is right before kind of the insurgency started to kind of act up, and so we were in this tactical formation, and we're talking back and forth, and I think I forgot what it was that triggered this, but I think it was we were looking for roadside bombs. That's what it was too, and he had remembered that, I had told him like, hey, we're not going to take out the trash anymore. You're not going to take out the trash anymore. Yeah. So stop coming by my office. Right. And so he says, yeah, that was, that we're all clear. He's on the radio. We're all clear. That was just a piece there's a piece of trash and there was a break, and he says, and remember, sir, Toyota, take out your own trash, asshole. And I just died laughing. And apparently the rest of the guys knew that story. And so that became, so whenever that was the code for, hey, take care of others by taking care, never to be good. Never be too good to take out your own trash. Right. And I just remember that, and for the rest of my career, and even until today, it's like we get in a position of responsibility, and we lose ourselves, and we forget what it's like to be the person who takes out the trash, and I think just by simply doing that, you remember who you are and what you're about and where you started. Right. And that you should never be too good to take out your trash, and that's really the essence of the wipeout mindset.
So in talking with some of the former presidents or staff members or whatever, is there a common thread, Andy, that you see in all of them, whether it's the servant leadership piece? Like, I don't think you can become a president or get into that type of a leadership position without having some desire to make your country better, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Is there kind of a common thread there that that they all shared?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, and the first two ones that jump out to me, so I'll start with H.W. Bush. The theme there was we were in College Station, so that was kind of cool. I was like, I joked around, said I was co-hosting, and so because they're in my backyard where I work here, but for George H.W. Bush, what a lot of people don't realize is how qualified he was to be president because of the jobs that he did. Like, I didn't even realize that kind of growing up about all the things that he'd done in his career and the different offices he served in, from, being, in charge of the CIA to being the first diplomat in China, just over and over again. Right. And so his thing was, although he wasn't a great communicator or orator on the public stage like Clinton was, his ability to develop strategic partnerships and connections and relationship was second to none, to where he had this, these people that had knew and loved him and his family and his wife, regardless of who he was, because he had this ability to, approach things with humility and authenticity, and to listen and to build bridges. And I think that was, and starting with his wife, that's really stood out with me too. And a lifelong relationship that was a true strategic partnership, and how, that regardless of what side of the aisle you sat on, red, blue, he was somebody that, outside of the public eye, was always trying to build bridges. And, there were some really great stories, about that I won't get into. So communication was a really big one. How do you communicate your vision, and your mission? I think Bill Clinton was a master at that, a very charismatic guy. He spoke to us. He's 75 years old, and his ability to recall information and talk about relevant world events, I think, was just kind of blew me away. I mean, the guy oozes with charisma, and, and it was interesting to kind of hear people talk about they're human beings, right? And what he said really jumped out to me is that when we look at public figures, and I think you could take like the Will Smith, Chris Rock incident as a good example of this, right? Is we look at these public figures as two-dimensional characters, right? And that's even more. And then in our media, modern media, not necessarily you guys, but like, the big media companies and even social media, we turn people into two-dimensional caricatures and cartoons that we can, just criticize and analyze and judge. And so what Bill Clinton talked about was the willingness and ability to add the third dimension to human beings in terms of how we create space and we show up, wanting to co-author their story, and about understand everybody's story matters. And if we're willing to listen and to enter conversations with empathy and to create space to tell their story and to co-author their story, I thought that was so cool, is that every interaction we have, including you guys and I, we are co-authors of each other's story. And so that really just resonated with me about how do we find the third dimension in people? How do we slow down, understand people's stories, and then co-author them together to move forward towards common goals or a vision, which is really, really powerful to me. And I just have, I really value the mundane conversations I've had with my classmates in, at the airport or on the way home or the way there or on the bus or over meals. And they've just done a masterful job of mixing and matching us to where we can interact and have these intentional collisions. So I'm very thankful for it.
Andy, you made me think of something, because when I think about Bill Clinton, I think about somebody who, people remember the way he made them feel. And I think that's something that you're kind of speaking to there, is that whether it was through his ability to connect with people, and maybe that came from that upbringing. But I think that was something that was a really very powerful tool. And really, when you think about those, just the three leaders you talked about there with Clinton and both Bushes, I think they all were effective communicators in their own right, but also are people who, through different challenges, it was that ability to kind of make people feel a certain way. And that's what, was part of their charisma. I want to talk about that Will Smith, Chris Rock thing, because it's something that's been on my mind. And I saw where you had commented about this on Instagram a while back about compassion, going beyond sympathy and empathy. And, I think we're so quick right now, and we sometimes forget that everybody is suffering from something. Everybody's got their own challenges in life, and we are so quick to judge. And one of my favorite books, and I'll be a big, trumpet this for a long time is it's a leadership book that Stephen Covey wrote. It's an oldie but a goodie, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the principles of the 7 habits is seek first to understand. So whenever something happens, is our first gut instinct should not be to judge. It should be to understand and really understand where are they coming from, what's going on in their life that has led to this point. Because I think we can all agree the whole Will Smith thing, that was not about Chris Rock and that joke. There was something so much deeper going on in his life. But even if, and I'm still kind of projecting a little bit by even making that comment. But the reality of it is, I think this is a reflection of where we are from a societal standpoint right now is we no longer have the middle ground. It's all about choosing sides. No matter what the issue, you have to choose a side, right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It's like this. My first lesson in PLS was we kind of showed this, these 2 concentric circles to where, even politically, like, what I learned through one of our lessons was like, we're not as divided as actually we think we are. When you look at some of the research by the Pew Institute, right? But what happens is that, like you're saying, we get picked sides to where it's highlighted instead of the middle where the cross section of those 2 circles are, it's really pushed us out to this perception that we're on the edges, and that's not necessarily accurate, right? And I think what I saw too, and I'm happy to share this model. I posted on that same one where that humans are like icebergs, and we only see at best 10% of each other through our behaviors. But we, the way that we assess ourselves is we look at our intent, but we don't understand what's fully below the surface. And we have what's called an introspection illusion as well too, and a bias of our own blind spots that includes, sometimes a willingness to assassinate someone's character based on 10% of who they are, right? When the reality is that below the surface is our attitudes, our emotions, which, also you can say, like you say, it's a feelings that encompasses emotions and physiology. We have, obviously we have our motivations or our drive. That's the engine that drives us. Below that, we have, our purpose. That's our why. And then fundamentally, at the core of who we are is our values or our principles, right? And so what we're walking around is these vessels where we only see the behaviors, and nor is that's also the things that we can measure even scientifically, but yet we don't take the time to attempt to see below the surface. It's exactly what you're talking about. So so what is it about Chris Rock? I mean, let's not take sides here for a second. Let's look at it objectively. What was it about Chris Rock that led him to make the comment that he did, whether it was appropriate or not, and then how he responded, right? Because people are very quick to look at how he responded versus what the intent behind what he was doing. Right. Yeah. And then let's look at Will Smith, right? And we saw a little bit about when he gave a speech about a little bit of the window of his soul down to kind of what he was going through a little bit. And he made some indications of that too about, but again, we're very quick to assassinate his character, saying this is completely out of character and this guy's a jackass. And so we say to ourselves, well, I would never do that, and this is completely out of character. And we start throwing out words like toxic masculinity and, and talking about, condoning violence. And we talk about what should have been done and so on and so forth. And we just dehumanize these people. But we look at them as 2-dimensional caricatures, and we don't look at them as 3-dimensional human beings who are doing their best to be human doings. And it's sad to me. It's sad to me, and
there's something wrong, Andy, with our, we do this to our sports heroes. We do this to our, the actors, the actresses, whatever is. We love as a society to put people up on a pedestal just to tear them down. There's something that is deeper in there. And one of and guys, go if you haven't already started doing this from the last show, go and follow Andy on social media on Instagram. It's Coach_Reese RIISE. But one of the things that he shared with this particular post was, and I really liked it. It was like kind of a paradigm, or it was a little chart, if you will, as far as it had pity on there, which is I feel sorry for you. Sympathy is I feel for you. empathy was I feel with you, and then compassion is truly I am here to help. And I started thinking about this, Andy, and I was like, where you fall in that grid probably I think is a little reflective of you yourself, like when you see these stories and if your instinct is to be sympathetic, then that is, I think, where you are. And I would be willing to bet you, and Brandon talks a lot about this, is, that giving yourself grace. But I'd be willing to bet you if you're somebody who's quick to give others grace, you're probably going to be better at giving grace to yourself.
I think so. I think so too, and I also think that if you've been through a moral injury, like I have, you've been judged, and you look at life through a different lens when you've been through that, right? Because like like you said, I'm mid-wad bickering, man. I'm beating the hell out of myself, cussing myself out, trying to make sure that nobody hears me in the middle of my wad. Earmuffs, Paula. And so meanwhile, right. It's like we're on worst category. If we're very hard to, I would say the same thing. If we haven't given ourselves grace, we haven't forgiven ourselves, the likelihood that we are going to, it causes an insecurity that also projects out. It's called the shadow side of how our behaviors manifest. It's how we see and treat others as well too. But I agree with you. And I think a lot of people are talking about empathy, and I think it's a really, really good thing, but my challenge is I'm not cool with staying there, man. I'm like, if I have an opportunity to be compassionate and show compassion and be there for someone, even if it's doing nothing and just showing up for them, then that to me is what transformational leaders do. That's next level leadership, is moving from empathy to compassion. But like, there is some, first and second and third order transitions that need to be made there that we got to practice like muscles. And it's not easy to do. I think Brene Brown's work has really informed a lot of people. And I don't know how many people have watched that cool little video with the animals and the pit, and, that is such a great visual. If you haven't watched that, you're probably been living under a cave, but living in a cave. But I think it's such a great way to look at things. I think the challenge is like, how do I do that? Right. I know this is important, but how do I make that move, across that spectrum to be compassionate and demonstrate compassion, when the time lends itself and the opportunity presents itself for you to do that for somebody else.
I think this is such a complex, it's kind of a microcosm of the challenges that I think face leadership today, because you talk about, moving across that spectrum, and it's absolutely something that we need to do. And it's something that, as a leader, one of the things that leadership kind of puts in the rear view is what other people think of them. Right. And both of y'all touched on, and not that they don't care what people think of them, but they're going to do the best for the people they're trying to lead for. And in a case of being empathetic or compassionate, that compassion has to come at the cost of not caring what other people say, because y'all both touched on it. Social media creates this vacuum or this division where you do have to choose a side. And if you show compassion, and while you could show compassion to both sides, the other side is going to be angry with you. And as a leader, that's where you got to say, you know what? I don't really give a shit. Like, I'm trying to be open and be there for the person that needs me. You're just trying to troll. Until we can find this place where there's not this double standard, because those same people that will scream, whether it's masculine toxicity or whatever it is, right? When they see somebody that goes, hey, you know what? Like, he's opening up, he's doing this, he's doing that. You can't get anywhere. That acceptance has to be based upon the presence and the present. It's not what they were, what they tweeted 10 years ago, or a joke that was told. And I don't know. It's such a complex thing. I mean, Andy, we could have you on for another 2 hours talking about that part of it, right? And trying to unpack it. But it's complex. But I think the more the more compassionate that people can be, and really at the expense of not caring what they're going to get in return, both positively and negatively, I think that's a step in the right direction.
So
I agree.
Speaking of passions, Andy, I want to, and we'll start to wrap things up, because as Brandon said, I mean, number one, as we've been talking, I've been thinking, why did it go like months? But you've had a lot of different things that you've been doing and busy with, so we weren't able to connect. But I am curious. I mean, usually when I'm a participant in one of these types of programs like the Scholar Program, or even the wonderful work you're doing with the National Security Innovation Network, has it triggered a passion? Has it got you a spark in you about a particular topic, or something that's really on your mind a lot more as a result of this? I mean, how has it changed you?
Yeah, I think it's made me realize the direction that I'm moving in, I think, and to continue to stay on that path, as far as what my you look at the Ikigai concept as far as what my value is to the world. But like, most importantly, where does that start with me, as far as trying to be a world-class teacher, coach and speaker, and use the platform like you guys are giving me to be able to talk about these topics that not a lot of people are talking about, and do so in a way that people can relate to that on a number of different levels. And so I think that it's really just solidified the journey that I'm on in a lot of different ways. I certainly don't have it all figured out, how I'm going to get there, but to enjoy what I'm doing, and to be in the moment. I know that's so overly used. And so what I mean by that is, like, I have a present moment focus on, the meaningful relationships with people to help them solve these problems and come together. I think that's kind of my superpower. It's bringing people together in that way. I also think I'm very grounded in my values. I know, who I am, or I think I know who I am. And I think this kind of what my purpose is, has also been further solidified in this journey. And I just feel really blessed to do that with really cool people, like you guys who share the same vision and mission.
One is, one of the things is being a mental performance coach in that kind of mental skills realm is, I always tell people, is I'm a perspective coach more than anything. It's like my challenge is I'm always trying to get people to think differently about things than maybe the way they currently are. Yeah. And I think that one of the things for you, as I'm thinking about these new endeavors, especially with that national security innovation, is it's all about challenging the status quo. And so really, to your That's point, right. the question Brandon asked you earlier about, what are some of the things that you've brought from that mental skills realm over to what you're doing now, is that's the same thing. You were challenging the status quo. You were challenging the way that people were thinking about things. They were just doing it internally. But now by, you all kind of being solution focused and looking at some of these problems, it still allows you to be somebody who is, focused on challenging the status quo. And I will say this to you, and one of the things I respect a lot, and I know Brandon's the same way about you, is that, as I was looking at your bio from the last show, and just in preparation for this show, and thinking about how some of the resume has changed a little bit, and the thing that always stands out to me is that spent over 20 years in service to our country. And I think to myself, I'd argue that you're still that clock didn't stop, right? You're still serving our country, because you are somebody that is just servant leadership is in your blood, but it's also that ability to continue to foster and develop and help, kind of shape, if you will, some of these minds right now that you're doing on campus at Texas A&M. but then also working with that leadership scholarship program. I think these are all things that we're just super happy for you, and being able to do those things, I think is really great.
I really appreciate that. And on a number of different levels, and I'm really humbled by those words. And I think you're spot on. I mean, it has never, ever been about me, and
Yep.
all these opportunities that I have are just another opportunity to pour back into others. That's who I am. That's what I'm about. And what that looks like is, it changes a little bit. It certainly does. But at the end of the day, it's really about service to others and people over everything.
Yeah. And if we can all take some of that and bring more compassion to it or whatever, I think we're going to be better off in the long run. So, well, listen, brother, we can't thank you enough. I mean, we're always so happy to catch up with you. And I know it's never long enough, but, we'll definitely be getting you back on the show and start to unpack some more topics in the future. So we'll get it done this time sooner rather than later.
Sounds good, guys. Can't wait to get the band back together. And thanks as always. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. Take care, Andy.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.